Good luck.
Evet, katılımcılarımızın gelmesini bekliyoruz. Merhabalar herkese, hepiniz IFD Talks webinarlarına hoş geldiniz. Bugün dünya sıralamasında 152. sıradaki University of Exeter ile İngiltere'de psikoloji programlarını Hayley ve Catherine'den dinliyor olacağız. Lütfen sorularınızı soru cevap bölümünden yönlendiriniz. Yes, Hayley, the stage is yours now.
Thank you. So hi everyone, thanks for joining this University of Exeter webinar today. My name's Hayley and I'm one of the international officers here at the university. So today we're going to be focusing on psychology. So joining us today we have Dr. Catherine Ash-Bowlby, who is one of the psychology lecturers here at the university. And she's going to talk to you a bit about the programs we offer in psychology and what sort of support is available to you. If you have any questions during the presentation, if you just want to write them in the chat and then we'll answer those at the end of the session. So yeah, Catherine, over to you.
Thanks so much, Hayley. I'm just going to share my screen so you can see my slides. So there we go. So hopefully you can see those okay. So as Hayley said, my name is Kat and I'm a lecturer in psychology and co-director of undergraduate admissions, which is a role I share with my mentor, Dr. Avril Muse. So it's a pleasure to be here tonight to share with you about psychology for two key reasons. One reason is that I am genuinely passionate about psychology as a degree subject. It really is quite unique in being very multidisciplinary and it's very varied. So, you know, 1 week in animal behaviour, you could be learning about why it is that killer whales experience the menopause. Another week in social psychology, you could be looking at how children develop aspirations for different careers. And then another week in psychopharmacology, which forms part of cognitive psychology and clinical psychology, you could be looking at how different psychedelic drugs like magic mushrooms are being used to treat different psychiatric disorders. So it's really, really varied. And it's also quite unique as a degree, and it gives you skills in numeracy, literacy, employability. So there's really a lot of skills you gain from doing psychology. And the second reason I'm pleased to share with you about psychology is that I myself was actually an undergraduate at Exeter. So it's from personal experience, I can really recommend the degree. So what we're going to look at today is why you might want to choose doing psychology at Exeter, look a little bit at the different modules we teach, and what you'd be doing during a degree, and then talk a little bit about employability and life after university for many of our students. And then I think as well, we've got some time for some questions at the end, and I think you've got the chat as well you can add to. So why study psychology at Exeter? Psychology is ranked top 75 in the world for psychology and top 10 in the UK. Our program's accredited by the British Psychological Society, and that becomes really important if you're thinking about doing careers in psychology beyond your degree. Things like clinical psychology, educational psychology, for example, might require that you have a BPS accredited degree when you do further study. We've got an extensive range of specialist facilities, and 92% of our research is classed as world leading or internationally excellent. And I think that's one of the things which is really attractive about Psychology at Exeter, and it's quite special that we have these very different research groups. So we've got a social, environmental, and organisational psychology group, what's called the Sea Org group, and that's the group I'm part of. We've also got a clinical psychology group, a cognitive psychology group, and an animal behaviour group. And the more you do psychology, you realise it's really quite multidisciplinary. There's all these different parts to it, which are quite varied. And having these different groups is important for you as a potential student, because it means that it really informs the teaching that you get lecturers who are really passionate about their topics in these different areas. It means there's quite a range of different final year projects you can do, which involves research, different final year seminars, and informs the lectures and the teaching. So in terms of research facilities, we've got research and computer laboratories, state-of-the-art audiovisual facilities, fMRI imaging, psychophysiology labs, clinical training suites, as well as virtual reality labs. And these are all a bit small, so apologies if you can't quite see all of these, quite small writing, but I thought it's quite nice to share why our staff and our students actually choose Psychology at Exeter, to show you some of the reasons that the staff who work there decided to study there. So we've got things like, we're one of the few psychology departments in the country that have a clinical psychology group embedded within it, rather than clinical psychology being part of a medical school or another department. This means there's really good potential for research and crosses between clinical and non-clinical disciplines. And there's other ideas about it being friendly, especially for a Russell Group university. It's a very friendly one. It's got excellent research, lots of different courses. I've got another page as well. We've got quite a big department, so there are quite a lot of staff inputting into this for me. Oh, sorry. So this one as well, looking at these slides, some more reasons. And I quite like this one that says, because East Devon has it all: river, sea, cliffs, coves, heathland, moorland. It's even got beavers, so that's quite a random reason. It's got these cool little animals. And Psychology at Exeter is just as diverse as its surrounding habitat. So many different disciplines under one roof. It's a great melting pot of ideas. So Exeter is located in the southwest of the UK, in Devon, and it's really special campus. I think there's some statistic that we've got the most trees per student of any university in the UK, and it's a very green campus, and you've got access to lots of different areas of natural beauty from Exeter as well, as it being a quite nice university town with lots going on in the town. So in terms of our undergraduate degrees, our main degree that the majority of students study is the BSc in Psychology, which is 3 years. And then we also have some variations on that, which smaller numbers of students go on to study. So we've got a BSc Psychology with Sport and Exercise Science, a BSc Psychology with Study Abroad. And that's a course you don't apply for directly. You'd apply for the BSc in Psychology. And then once you're on that course, in the first year, you've got the option to study for a year abroad. There's also the BSc Psychology with Professional Placement. That's one that you'd apply for directly. And a BSc Psychology with Sport and Exercise Science with Professional Placement. And then the MSCI Applied Psychology, which is exactly the same as the BSc Psychology 3-year course. And then you have a year added on afterwards with a real clinical focus. Okay. So in terms of like assessment for our degrees, across the whole 3 years, it's roughly 50-50 in your assessment. So roughly 50% coursework, things like essays, writing practical reports, journal article reviews, and of course your final year research project, which is something that students really enjoy in the third year, where they got the opportunity to independently collect their own data and have their own research question and investigate it. And then about 50% in exams, whether that's essays or short answer questions. And in the first year as well, there's some multiple choice questions. So I mentioned quickly before the MSCI programme. So that's a 4-year programme at Exeter. So as I said, the first 3 years cover the undergraduate modules, and then the 4th year focuses on clinical practice, and graduates leave with this particular qualification. And you can find out a lot more about this course as well on our website if you look for the MSCI Psychology programme. There's lots of great things you can do on there. Our study abroad programme, as the name suggests, you can study in a different country for 1 year. Our students come into places like Europe, North America, Australia, Hong Kong, and you go to a university and study psychology modules that we're partnered with within that university. The professional placement is quite an exciting one, and that gives you the chance within the third year of your programme. So you have the 2 years of the BSc programme, and then you have 1 year in a professional placement, and then you have the final year of your degree. And students really have a big role in finding their own placements. Currently, I've got a tutee who's got a clinical placement at a hospital where she's working with a clinical psychology team who support children in different areas of the hospital. Other students are working in things like marketing if they're interested in more that side of psychology and potentially going into that as a career. So it's very much focused on what the student themselves is interested in, the placement they're interested in. But as I said, a smaller number of our students do study these programmes. The majority of our students study the BSc psychology course. So in this BSc psychology course, the first 2 years are really about getting like a foundational knowledge in psychology. So you study all these core modules. So things like cognitive psychology, biological psychology, social psychology, personality and individual differences, clinical psychology, developmental psychology. And then as well, throughout the degree, there's a lot of research methods and also statistics, which are really important because then you learn about how we collect data and how you get all this information in all the other subjects that you might enjoy. So in developmental psychology, for example, how do we research issues with children across the lifespan? In clinical psychology, what research methods do you use? So these modules are really important for letting you understand all the different areas of psychology. And of course, when you go on to do your own research project. So a typical structure of one of those core modules is you'd have 22 hours of lectures and then 3 tutorials. And in the first year, you also have these practical classes as well as private study to consolidate your knowledge. So just to tell you a bit about all these different areas, I don't know how much you've thought about or studied psychology before, if you've studied it in the past. Cognitive psychology is all about how we think, learn and process information, includes things like language development, cognitive control, learning, memory and reasoning. And knowing about how all of these areas work really helps us understand other areas of psychology, such as clinical and social psychology. And I've got an example of some research which shows that, and I've got a video to show you from one of our professors, Dr. Natalia Lawrence, whose research really sits within this area of, it's a cognitive project, which then has an application to the real world. So I'll play you this video and hopefully this will work.
So many of us struggle to stick to a healthy diet. In the UK, only 1/4 of us are eating the recommended amount of fruit and vegetables, that's our 5 a day, and around 3/4 of us are eating too much sugar, salt, and saturated fat. Eating a poor diet is now one of the leading causes of death globally, contributing to around 1 in 5 deaths. Now, why is this? Most of us know what we should be eating to be healthy, and we want to be healthy, but we still have a poor diet. Unfortunately, education and willpower are not enough to solve this. Our modern food environment is largely to blame, with less healthy foods having fat, sugar and salt promoted and sold everywhere at cheap prices. Now, these foods are really hard to resist. They have a powerful effect on our brain's reward centres, and they quickly and automatically grab our attention and trigger our brain's movement centres to make us choose and eat them. So what we need is new interventions that target these more automatic processes. We've spent over a decade developing a brain training game that aims to reduce the automatic urges triggered by less healthy foods and make them easier to resist. Our simple game requires people to just repeatedly respond, so go to pictures of more nutritious foods, and inhibit responding, stop, and stay as still as they can when they see foods high in fat, sugar, or salt. The game is available as an app on the Apple and Google Play stores. It's called Food Tea or Food Training. And it lets people choose the foods that they find hard to resist and want to train themselves to. People can even add their own photos into the game. By doing a few minutes of training every day, the brain should gradually learn to replace unhelpful habits and go responses to these less nutritious foods with a stop response. And people may find it easier to eat less of them. In our early lab studies, where we covered up the aims of our research, we found that people ate about 30% less after playing the game for 10 minutes. Out in the real world, people report eating between 13 and 20% less after playing the game for a week, and they also show significant weight loss. There's clearly an appetite for this kind of novel brain training approach to changing our diets. Over 100,000 people from all over the world have already used it. Hopefully, by evaluating the data and feedback that users share with us, we can continue to improve our food brain training and help more people stick to a healthy diet. We're running trials of the app in diverse groups of people, including children, adults living with obesity, and people with binge eating symptoms. The University of Exeter has made this rapid translation from basic science into new intervention possible by providing funding and facilities. Its excellent labs support the basic science that allow us to develop the intervention and understand how it works. Working with in-house and external computer programmers allowed us to develop the software. The Exeter Clinical Research Facility supported our preliminary trials and allowed us to recruit from a large local cohort of adults.
Brilliant. I hope you enjoyed that video. And that building, the pretty building there, is the Washington Singer, which is the psychology building at Exeter, where we're based. So that was cognitive psychology. Also in the first and second years, you study biological psychology. That includes lots of big words that you have to learn spellings for, but it's really interesting, all about neurophysiology, psychopharmacology, neuroanatomy, visual and auditory perception in relation to human behaviour. And then there's different areas within it, so things like drugs and their effect on their behaviour, emotion and motivation, and neurocommunications. And to tell you a bit more about that, I've also got a video. We're really lucky in the department to have Professor Celia Morgan, who appears in this video, who is a world-leading expert in the effect of drugs on the brain and behaviour. And she particularly studies how different psychedelic drugs can be used to treat alcoholism and different mental health conditions. So I'm just going to play you a little bit of this, of her talking about the brain.
Hi, my name is Celia Morgan, and I'm a professor of psychopharmacology in the psychology department here at the University of Exeter. So psychopharmacology is a bit of a mouthful, but essentially what it means is that I investigate the effects of drugs on the brain and behavior. I got interested in psychopharmacology really because of my interest in this thing. So I'm sure you're aware, this is a human brain. This is the same size as an average adult human brain, and they weigh around 1.3 kilograms, but don't let the size of it deceive you. This is an incredibly complex and powerful organ. So the adult human brain is estimated to have approximately 100 billion neurons in. So putting that in context, that's about the same number of stars as there are in a Milky Way galaxy. And each of those neurons, or brain cells, is connected to other neurons by an average of 7,000 individual connections called synapses between cells. So putting that in context again, that's about the same number of stars as there are in the universe. So this blows my 7 quintillion synapses just thinking about it. And I know I'm biased, but I think this is the most fascinating area of research. And it's at these 7 quintillion synapses throughout the brain that the drugs I study have their action. So synapses are the connections between neurons, and they're actually little gaps. I'm going to put my brain down. So where 2 neurons meet, there's a little gap between them. And in order for the electrical signals that are passing my brain all the time to cross that gap, they need a chemical messenger. So it acts as a little ferry taking the electrical impulse from one neuron to the next. And it's actually there that drugs have their action, but either by stopping the ferries from leaving one neuron to another or increasing the flow. So this increases the strength of the signal between 2 neurons. And so I'm interested in drugs and synapses in particular, not just because synapses are where drugs work if you're working on psychopharmacological drugs, but also I'm interested in drugs that can stimulate a process called synaptogenesis and how we might harness this process for mental health benefits and to make our psychological therapies work better. So synaptogenesis.
I'm going to stop there because unfortunately there's not enough time to play the whole video. But Celia is really interesting, isn't she, talking about her area of research. So I just wanted to share that with you. So another key area you study in the first and second year is social psychology. Social psychology is all about things, how we function as part of groups, organizations, include topics like group dynamics, decision-making, leadership, how we develop and have certain attitudes, and how attitudes might relate to behavior in different contexts. There's quite a big group at Exeter looking at social identity theory, the idea that at any one time we have lots of different identities, and depending on the situation you're in, those identities might become salient, and that might affect how you behave and how you feel. So for example, like in this talk now, you might think of yourself in terms of a student identity or a potential student, maybe of Exeter. Or if you went outside and you were talking to someone about your favourite football team, you might then think of yourself in terms of a supporter of that football team, and the things you do and think about might be quite different if you're thinking of yourself in those terms than as a potential student. There's also things like interpersonal relationships, how social psychology applies to organisations in the area of organisational psychology, and social cognition, so how we understand ourselves and others. Another module you study is personality and individual differences. I know students really enjoy this module. Dr. Avril Muse, who runs it, often has a task at the very beginning where she gets students to take part in some different personality tests, and you don't have to share the results, kind of for fun, for students to see how they work and kind of see how their own personality would be profiled according to these tests. And then you kind of critically look at, well, where did these tests come from? What do they really measure? How were the data developed? Look at things like the early origins of personality theory, how personality might relate to health, and personality disorders as well. Clinical psychology is often a really popular module as well across the first and second years. Looks at understanding a range of different psychological disorders from a biopsychosocial perspective. You might explore things like individual differences in mental health, anxiety-based reactions, depression, psychosis, drug and alcohol misuse, eating disorders, and different treatment approaches as well, and cutting-edge research showing which treatments are currently the most effective. At Exeter, we have the Mood Disorder Centre, which is an amazing place with lots of really, new research is going on around clinical psychology. It's also developmental psychology, looking at from conception to adolescence across the lifespan, how people develop, things like social and moral development in children, language development, as well as memory development, and some of the different factors, whether they're cultural, social, environmental, that influence development as well. We're also thinking back to when I was saying at the beginning of this talk, how we're quite lucky to have a very diverse group in psychology that's very multidisciplinary. Because of our links in animal behaviour, we have modules in evolution of behaviour, where you study things like natural self-selection in evolution, different concepts and methods in animal behaviour, social behaviour in animals. And I know when we had our lectures online in COVID, these modules were really popular, particularly because the lecturers were able to have things like little toy flamingos and giraffes to talk about animal behaviour that loads of us in social psychology just didn't have as interesting props. So as I said, the aim of this first year really is to get this broad foundational knowledge in psychology, give you training and research skills and in statistics, and you do 90 credits of core psychology modules, and then there are some choices as well. So these are some of the, you can choose to do one of these modules, either in clinicals, these are your core modules, and then these are your optional modules. So you can choose to do one in either workplace learning, classic studies in psychology, or introduction to behaviour and evolution. If it fits in with a timetable, there's often as well some choices to go outside of psychology and see if you can study a module in another discipline. So for example, some students who are really interested in law have studied in the past a criminal law module in the law school, but this all depends on kind of timetabling and availability. Into the second year of your degree, so you have those core modules again, and you also get training in key research methods as well. So you have the choice of doing different practical classes, And in those 12-week classes, you learn particular research skills. So there's a social practical class, a cognitive practical class, an animal behaviour one, and a qualitative research method. So qualitative research is all about when you've got words as data rather than numbers as data. So things like if you're doing in-depth interviews or focus groups, or diary studies to explore in detail people's experiences of things. So I currently run the qualitative methods one, so we started that yesterday. It's really fun module where we do things like learning interview skills, and currently the students are designing interview schedules to look at the relationship between having pets and well-being as just an opportunity to practice their interview skills and develop those skills. So I know the final year of the course is often really popular with students because you really get the chance to specialise a bit more in the areas that you're interested in. You spent the 2 years getting that kind of core foundational knowledge. And then in the third year, you have the chance to choose 3 different modules that you study, and they're like little seminar groups, often with around 35 people. And over the course of 11 to 12 weeks, you regularly meet in these groups and study in depth these areas that you're interested in. And I'll show you a list of some of what those modules look like in a second. As well as that, you've also got your research projects. So that's a really big part of the final year of your degree. And I know something a lot of the students enjoy. People either work individually or often in groups on a research study. And the study they do really depends on the area that they're interested in choose. So for example, because I run the qualitative course, I've got a lot of students I supervise doing qualitative projects. I've got students this year doing quite diverse projects, from things like about climate anxiety and climate change and how it impacts on well-being. That comes from environmental psychology, to students interested in student mental health, exploring the sources of support available for students and how that impacts on their mental health. So, and other people do them, that's because they're kind of my areas. Other people do them in kind of, cognitive psychology, clinical psychology. So there's a lot of diversity in the final year projects people do, depending on their interests. As well as those kind of ones in the third year, you also study methods and statistics, kind of carrying through that real focus on gaining these really good research skills as part of your degree. There's also something called contemporary issues in psychology as well, learning about particularly new topics in psychology, which I know students enjoy. So these are just to give you some ideas of these final year seminars that you choose from. So you choose 3 of these. These aren't even the full list. They sometimes change slightly, their seminars year to year, depending on the lecturers that put them on and their kind of interests. But currently these are some examples. And if you look on our Exeter website for psychology, you can see even more. So we've got environmental psychology, psychology and law, the psychology of gender, work and organisational psychology, associated basis of addictive behaviour, which is a slightly more clinical focus one, the psychology of ageing and ageism, studying cognition and emotion with brain imaging, compulsive behaviour, parent psychiatric disorders and children's development, women and mental health, social inclusion, and the psychology of close relationships. So you can see there's a lot of diversity in the different courses that you can specialise in the third year. In terms of what your kind of teaching and learning looks like in psychology, you have a mix of teaching methods for the time that you spend with us. So whether that's kind of particularly in the first and second years, often there's the bigger lectures. And then as well as that, you have these smaller academic tutorials where you can explore some of the issues from the bigger lectures in a smaller group. As well as that, there's these practical classes, such as the qualitative one I mentioned, where you work as a So currently we've got quite a large group on our qualitative cohort, but then they work in small groups of around 6 students to kind of work together to do their research projects. Then you also have for your final year project, you meet with your supervisor regularly. You also have a personal tutor at Exeter that you have a certain number of sessions with as well. And as well as private study. So private study as well forms an important part of learning at university as well. So in terms of how we support you when you're at university, as I just mentioned, all students, when they start in the first year, will be assigned a personal tutor, and they're your first port of call for any issues that you're having, and as a source of support. And you have regular meetings with your tutor throughout the year. There's also senior tutors and year tutors that sit above that can provide extra support that you might need. We have a mature student advisor. We also have different help desks. So they're things that are run by postgraduate students that you can go to. So we've got a statistics one, a biological psychology, an essay feedback one. And they're really helpful for students to go to just to get that extra support. So in the first year, Dr. Iona Kapantai is our first year tutor. She runs a peer mentoring scheme in psychology, which I know students have been enjoyed taking part in. You're paired with a third year student if you sign up for the scheme, and they help you to settle in and share their experiences. And they have kind of like a whole, like, you can see profiles of the third year students who are signed up to be mentors, and then you can kind of ask to be paired with someone who you feel you kind of resonate with, or you feel comfortable talking to. We also have a welfare advisor in psychology. So if you feel that anything about your personal life is potentially impacting on your studies, you can have a meeting with your tutor and Tim to kind of talk about things that we could do to better support you. There's also the study zone at Exeter, which is open to all students. They have different systems in place, so you can drop into different clinics and have this guy kind of have writing clinics and different sources of support. They also have a new maths clinic if you want help with that. There's lots of different online resources as well about things like essay writing, revising, kind of organising your work at university. And that links through to wellbeing services as well. So we have a wellbeing services at Exeter that provides support to all students with any aspect of their wellbeing or mental health. There's lots of kind of positive online resources to help with kind of resilience, and as well as things for people who are experiencing mental or physical health conditions and would like more support. Another resource that might be worth mentioning is, I know lots of our international students in psychology enjoy using, is as part of the wider university, there's an English language skills development programme. And we actually had a talk by the in-sessional team in psychology last week, and they're just a really lovely team who support particularly international students. They meet regularly, they do different sort of writing programs to support students who are maybe writing in a new language, maybe for the first time, and develop skills around writing. So, and I know the students who kind of go to that as a one-off, or there's other students that have used that for their whole 3 years of their degree and like regularly meet with the team. But they're, yeah, a really lovely team who work really hard to support international students. So I've mentioned that already about assessment. So in terms of preparing for your future, psychology, because it is such a multidisciplinary one, you know, when you're doing it, you're kind of really developing science skills and kind of statistics skills, more kind of quantitative skills. And then you're also developing these social science skills in terms of essay writing. It does open you up to lots of different kind of careers. And I guess our students do go on to lots of different careers after they've completed their degree. And so, because ultimately the aim of our course is to train students to become psychologically engaged global citizens capable of applying advanced understanding of the basic principles of human behaviour to help individuals, groups and societies in an ethically and socially responsible manner. So in terms of like employability opportunities, because often it's really important for students to think about, you know, what careers they might go on to after their degree. It's a big investment in time and money, and they want to think about that in advance. Although don't worry, because many of the students also don't know, you know, quite what jobs they want to do in the future. And I think that's quite normal, isn't it, as well? But it's something to think about what we provide in terms of employability. So we have different sessions run by the careers team offering things like how to write CVs, application forms, interviews. There's a dedicated employability lead you can talk to. There's a program called Handshake, which gives different employability opportunities. And there's different presentations and events throughout the year, and a strong link with local employers as well. I know, for example, in psychology this year, there's a career fair being organised where people can meet different employers that might be relevant to psychology and provide students with some opportunities, you know, to think about their careers going forward. There's also parts of employability built into the degree. So I don't know if you remember when I said in the first year, there's 3 options of doing 3 different modules, and one of those is called workplace learning. And that module helps you develop team building skills, thinks about things like professionalism and your online profile. And as part of that module, you do 35 hours of work experience. So that's quite a nice module, gives you an opportunity to kind of, develop these employability schemes as it's embedded into your degree. Within the second and third year of your degree as well, there's also opportunities. Students don't have to do this, but they can apply for research internships. So that's a really exciting opportunity for students to work closely with our lecturers and researchers on different projects they've got going on. So for example, I know a student who worked on a cognitive project, and she went into the RD&E, which is the Royal Devon Exeter Hospital, and did looked at different cognitive measures with patients as part of this internship, supervised obviously by her lecturer at Exeter. And I know for her that was a really invaluable experience to kind of support her views on where she wanted to go next with psychology. So really, yeah, in terms of life after university, there's lots of different opportunities, whether that be in science or in research. Also as well, we have students, because of their communication and people skills, who go into things like marketing and work more in the economic world or in personnel roles or caring professions. And of course as well, there's students that go on to become professional psychologists. So whether that be in different areas, so whether they go on to become a clinical psychologist, an educational psychologist, forensic psychologist, or I myself am a research and teaching psychologist, so based at the university. So yes, psychology is just really incredibly diverse, and you see that the more you study and get into it, and there's lots of different opportunities within it. So I think that might be my last slide. I have 45 minutes, but I think I've speeded through all that. So yeah, I hope that's long enough, Hayley. I don't know if there's any questions. I can see some in the chat.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Yeah, I've answered a few of the more general questions as we've been going along. So if you did ask a question, you might find I've written your answer down for you. But there are a few that, yeah, I was just going to address to you. So they're sort of more about jobs, research, that kind of thing. So the first question is, how do I get research experience?
Yes, so hopefully I just maybe answered some of that in the last bit. So in terms of, I guess, what you mean by research experience, so you get research experience throughout the degree. So you're doing things like these practical courses where you're doing a cognitive practical, a social practical, there's qualitative practicals, and you're kind of getting that experience of how you do the research. So that's kind of embedded within the degree at Exeter. In terms of actually like working as a researcher, there are those internship opportunities in the second and third year that all students are welcome to apply for, and I know many students do. And then you also get research experience doing your final year project, where you're actually doing the research yourself. So I had a student, for example, last year who did a qualitative project. So she did in-depth interviews, again, around the subject of student mental health. And that she's now got a job at the NHS, where she looks at patient experiences, and she uses her qualitative research skills in that job. And I know doing her final year project and talking about it in the interview really helped her get the job.
Right. Yeah, and I think you probably covered the next two a bit in the presentation as well. But so the first one is about internship opportunities, and the second one is about what are our career services like, and do we guide new graduates to find a job as a psychologist in the UK?
Okay, so yeah, the internship opportunities, hopefully I've answered that is an option in the second and third year, and that students are told about the options and then they can apply for them if they're interested in them. And then obviously it's like a sort of any application process, it depends, sometimes nobody's interested, lots of people are interested, it's kind of and they have an interview, so they're not guaranteed, but many students who are interested do those internships. And then in terms of the career service, there's the whole of Exeter as a university obviously has quite a big infrastructure. So there's things like wellbeing services and a career service, which is open to everybody in the university, regardless of what you're studying. So that's, a really good resource. The career zone you can make appointments with, and they've got, dedicated people to talk to you about careers. I guess in terms of guiding people to a job as a psychologist, there's all these different things within the degree where So for example, you know, the careers fair that's currently on, where people get opportunities to think about different careers in psychology and different talks going on. The 3-year BSc course is sort of the foundation, I guess, if you then want to go on to be a psychologist, but it depends, I guess, on the area that you're interested in. So for example, if you're interested in clinical psychology in the UK, usually people are advised to go on and get, after their degree, to go on and do work experience in relevant areas of clinical psychology or in caring roles. And then after they've done that, there's an opportunity to apply for a DClin, which is kind of like a program that's run at Exeter and other universities, a doctorate, where you're employed by the NHS as you complete that 3-year course to go on to become a clinical psychologist. But usually those programs require kind of work experience first. So hopefully that answers your question. There's also master's programs that people go on to do as well in psychology. So for example, I had a student last year who wanted to become a forensic psychologist. So she completed her degree and she's now doing a forensic psychology master's. So yeah, it really depends on the area of psychology you're interested in.
Okay, great. So the next one is sort of looking for, I suppose, an application perspective. So what kind of personality should those who want to study psychology have, and what sort of potential are you looking for?
So what sort of potential? That's interesting. So in terms of, I guess, in terms of personality, yeah, I don't know if there's a particular personality that can study psychology. I think it's such an interesting degree. Like you don't, you know, I guess, you know, it's such an interesting one to study that people from lots of different backgrounds, lots of different types of personalities really enjoy it. In terms of like potential skills that you might need, I guess, you know, a willingness to see things from other people's perspectives. One of the things in psychology that you learn really quickly is there's always different theories, different explanations of things, different research studies that either support or criticize different theories. So that kind of openness to the fact that there's lots of different explanations of behavior, openness to kind of, I guess, new ways of thinking and new ideas is really good. Hopefully that answers your question a little bit.
Okay, so the next one is to work as a psychologist in the UK after graduation, do international people need to enter a kind of exam or anything like that?
So it's if you did a UK you know, so I guess if you did the degree at Exeter, you've got the BPS accredited degree. So just doing the degree itself, you don't become you're gaining psychology skills, but you're not like a registered clinical psychologist or anything like that through doing the 3-year program. You then have to go on to further study. So if you did you're the same as any UK student that's done the Exeter program going on, you'd have to consider, and I guess it depends where you did the clinical training, and I guess it would be a case of looking up the different guidelines in different countries. So I'm afraid I can't speak to that really, because it really depends on where you did your further training. But the BPS in psychology forms the basis of many different areas that you could go into in clinical psychology, if that makes sense.
Off the top of my head, I'm not sure about this one, but are there programs related to business administration and psychology in the University of Exeter?
Business administration. So no, not currently. The business school obviously have lots of different programs which you might want to look at, which are really interesting, because there are actually some psychologists teaching within the business school who've gone on to do organisational research. But currently we're not linked with the business school currently, like offering a joint kind of honours degree, unfortunately.
Okay, and the final one at the minute.
Sorry, just to add to that one though, the only thing is I do have another student who's really interested in sort of business and psychology, and you can kind of, I guess, do organizational psychology within your degree. So if she's, for example, chosen the organizational psychology final year module where you study that for 12 weeks, and she's also doing an organizational psychology business focused research study. So there are ways to bring it into the degree, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's great. So yeah, the final question at the minute is about scholarships. So I'll just quickly cover that one if you like. So it depends when you're applying. So for this September, we're currently offering the Global Excellence Scholarships. These are usually up to £10,000 award that will be deducted off your tuition fee. How it works is you would apply for the course, and then once you've got an offer from us, you can then submit a separate application for the scholarship. This is quite a short application. It's only sort of a short statement. It's 4 questions that you need to answer. All the information's online, so you can find all the questions and everything that you need to submit the application. There is a deadline for this though. The deadline for this one at the minute is the 21st of April. So if you wanted to apply for a scholarship, you would need to have applied for your course, got your offer, and then got the scholarship application in before the 21st of April. Okay, so yeah, we don't actually have any more questions. So I guess we'll finish up there if no one's got anything else to ask.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much for for presenting at this webinar. And yeah, I hope everyone enjoyed it. And if you do think of any further questions that you've got, sort of, anytime in the future, you can just drop us an email. I will very quickly type my email address in the chat for you. And then, yeah, like I say, any further questions, just drop us an email. Okay, there you go. Okay,
yes, thank you very much for the great presentation, Catherine and Hailey. It was a very informative session for the attendees, and you covered all of the questions. Thank you for your answers too. And also I would like to thank the participants in Turkish as well. Katıldığınız için teşekkür ederiz arkadaşlar. Umarım sizin için de faydalı bir webinar olmuştur. University of Exeter ile ilgili diğer sorularınız için chat kısmında paylaşılmış olan mail adresinden Hailey ile iletişime geçebilirsiniz. Bir sonraki webinarlarımızda görüşmek üzere. Thank you very much again, you guys. It was a pleasure to have you in IFT Talks.
Thank you.
Thank you. And sorry if I spoke too fast. I just saw that in the chat. You should have shouted out to me.
It's all right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.